next season preview takes us to the Sky Blues Sydney FC, coached by Ante Juric, who is in the final year of his contract with Sydney FC, and Burke. They are coming off an insanely disappointing season, missing finals for the first time in club history, and they've cleaned house as a result. There are a lot of departures, and I'll take everyone a little bit inside baseball here with this. So on our run sheet, I've got notable ins, notable outs, players returning, and under notable outs, I just put yes.
Yes. There have
So
been exits.
yes, there have been exits. They cleared out their entire goalkeeping department. They cleared out basically their entire forward line. Lucy Johnson, Margot Chevet, Faye Bryson, Millie Farrow, Shay Connors, Bethany Mason-Jones, Jasmine Black, Talia Franco, Brianna Edwards, Princess Sabini, Jordan Thompson, and then Indiana Dos Santos, still contracted to the club, but suffered an ACL injury during the off-season and is expected to be out for the entire season, barring some sort of miraculous recovery where she'd maybe be like around 20, like it would be an end of season return basically. So she's out for what is expected to be the entire season with an ACL injury. Then you have a look at some of the notable ins: Madison Asen, Riley Tanner, Tiana Robertson, Amelia Cassar, Bianca Galich, Heather Hins, Sophia Fante, Sky Halmaric, and then some of their re-signings include Nat Tobin, Maddie Caspers, Abby Lemon, Kirsty Fenton, Hannah Lowry, Amber Luchtmeyer, Kaylee Talon-Henniker, Ruby Sullivan, Shay Holman, Tori Tumeth, and their midfield ace Mackenzie Hawkesby Burke.
Yeah, they very much have cleared out. Um, it'll be, I, I'm trying to work out how they're gonna make it work because last season their issue wasn't really the goalkeepers, I felt, and was more so the fact that their forward line wasn't forward lining at all to the point where they had to put Mackenzie Hawkesby in the forward line.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and
I don't know. It
to
worked,
Ante's credit,
I
it worked.
guess. It worked. Just. So I guess with some of the signings that they have, hopefully we'll see a forward line that forward lines. Um, I think I'd I think that would be good for Sydney to do that. I would like to see it. Um, I'm yeah, looking forward to also seeing Bianca Galich because she had a absolute ripper of a season with Central Coast and got herself a 3-year contract with Sydney FC. So how she manages to kind of pull that form across will be interesting.
Yeah, I agree with your point about the goalkeepers. I feel like they were very much made the scapegoat for Sydney's problems. I mean, Ante was very much chopping and changing his goalkeepers with regularity. Like Bree Edwards started the season, then she gets dropped because she makes a mistake. Talia Franco comes in, she gets dropped because she makes a mistake. Bree Edwards comes back in, gets dropped because she makes a mistake. They signed Beth Mason Jones, who got injured in a game against the Newcastle Jets. Jasmine Black, who was signed at the start of the season, was not a mid-season signing like Beth Mason Jones was, then comes in and sees out the rest of the season. Um, but then I look at the way other players played out, right? Like Shay Connors was sort of chopped and changed out of the squad. Princess Abini, Ante was sort of saying that well, she's a player that if she's fit, she's going to start, and then a few weeks later was bringing her off the bench. And I use that as an example, and I asked him after the Unite round game against Melbourne City, the mistake that Bree Edwards made that led to her getting dropped. They're just gonna, we're gonna back our our young players, our young keepers. We're gonna back them. They're gonna make mistakes. It's going to happen. But then you make the change a week later to Talia Franco, and again, it was just sort of like the chopping and changing, where like everything he was saying wasn't quite matching up with what was happening on the field with the squad. Like it was very confusing last year.
Yeah, very odd. Very odd. But hey, hopefully they'll experience some more consistency this season. I know they kind of found their feet right at the end, but it wasn't enough at that point.
Yeah, and so I'll head to your burning question, Burke.
Will Sydney make finals this season? They didn't last year for the first time ever, as you mentioned. Um, will they return with this kind of new look squad?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question to ask, and I want to say yes. I look at the players that have come in along with the core group that they've kept, where in theory they should. Like I think there's enough there, and I think Ante Juric is a good enough coach that he should be able to keep things moving in the right direction. Which I think leads to my burning question, which is will Ante Juric be under pressure to keep his job if he gets off to a poor start? And there's a lot of context and nuance that goes into this particular question. Last year was the worst start to a season that Sydney FC have had from a points perspective. Ante said that Sydney always starts slow, so I actually did a bit of a dig into the numbers, and last year was the slowest start that they had through a comparable time frame. And I'll link the article to that on the Roundball Australia website, which was not written by me. Christian Montagan ended up writing that article, but I did a look at the numbers to allow him to build that article out. So I'll put a link to that in the description below if you want to read it. Then the other bit of context that I think it's important to put in here is that he is still coaching Sydney United. They will still be competing in the Australian Championship when Sydney FC get their season underway. Look, we're moving beyond the point where I think expecting coaches to have two jobs it's getting towards impossible, right? And I think looking back at last season, right, like Sydney got off to a slow start. They picked it up in mid season with some tweaks of the squad, some changes as you touched on, Burke. But also look at the start of the last NPL men's New South Wales season, where Sydney United got off to a poor start. At the same time, Sydney FC were hitting form in the A-League Women and making their finals charge. Sydney FC don't make finals, and Sydney United suddenly find their straps and make things work. I don't believe in coincidences too much, so I want to say I can't necessarily accuse Ante of stretching himself too thin, but I think there's a little bit more there than meets the eye. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence by any stretch that Sydney FC performing well, Sydney United performing bad. Sydney United perform well once Ante no longer has to focus on Sydney FC, right? Because he's in pre-season when last season started with Sydney United. I think I've mentioned Sydney United far too much for a women's football podcast, but he then goes on to win a trophy with Sydney United. He wins the Waratah Cup, one of the foundation sides of the Australian Championship. They made a tilted finals. They got eliminated in a shootout to Marconi. As of the time of recording, they've drawn their first game in the Australian Championship. They are getting ready to face Apia Leichhardt. As of the time of recording, they could very depending on how that goes, they could possibly be out of the running for the knockout stages of the Australian Championship, and so perhaps this point becomes moot. But they're still going to have to play two games he's going to have to coach 2 games of the Australian Championship while, while the A-League women's season is going on, at least, if not more, if they get to the knockout stages. I don't think Sydney FC will take 2 seasons in a row of missing finals. As I said, last year was the first in their history. All streaks were made to be broken, I think, is how the saying goes. But, I can't see Sydney FC wanting that to settle in, right? Because 2 very quickly becomes 3. 3 very quickly becomes 4. And then before you know it, to use a cross-sport reference, you're the Buffalo Sabres in the NHL who have not made the playoffs for 15 years in that sport, which is the longest streak of not having made the playoffs in the NHL. In a 32-team competition where 16 teams make the playoffs each year. So that sort of, it just very quickly deteriorates into, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. So I don't think Sydney FC will want to let it get to that point. And so, again, I ask you, is Ante Juric under pressure to keep his job?
Given everything you've said, I'd have to say yes. Because, yeah, like you said, it's just absolutely not a good look for a side like Sydney to not be in finals. Yeah.
Where do you see Sydney FC finishing this season? They finished in 8th last year on 25 points, so 8 back of what the finals cutoff was. 7 wins, 4 draws, 12 losses.
If they can't get their forward line to work, think they're going to still be stuck around there. If they can get their forward line to work, I'd say they'll sneak into finals.
I think they're going to make finals, and I think they're going to do so comfortably. I think, despite everything I just said, I think there is enough there with this squad to make it. I think there is enough there with this squad to do so quite comfortably, and I think we're going to see a return to the Sydney FC of years past where they dominate the competition. I don't think they'll have enough there to sort of chase down the 2 Melbourne teams, but I can see them going top 4. They'll be comfortably in finals. They make a genuine tilt at the championship, and the conversation I've just had will be for absolute naught. But look, by that being said, this team needs to click. Everything's going to have to go right for them after last season. I don't see them missing finals unless things go horribly, horribly wrong. So I'm going to say they'll be top 4. And then your player to watch.
My player to watch, I already mentioned her earlier, but it's got to be Bianca Galic. I want to see how well her form transfers between a squad like Central Coast and this Sydney FC side, and how she goes under a new coach.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to give you a second one because I've got 5 I want to do.
Oh no. I think Riley Tanner should be interesting. Forward, looks like she's the kind of like-for-like response to Princess Abini leaving, and she had a really good World Cup, I feel, down here a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think she'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, and she looked good in the Panama games that
those 2
where they played the Matildas over in Perth. And so, yeah, she's kind of just slowly gotten used to, Australian conditions, and so she could get off to a high-flying start. As I mentioned, I've got 5 players here that are my one to watch. I'm not going to go through them in detail. Sophia Fante, I don't need to go through her in detail. If you click above our heads, you'll be able to see the scouting series video I did on her during the NPL Women's New South Wales season. I always like watching Abby Lemon. She's an absolute star. Whether she plays at left back again or whether she plays, sort of attacking midfield, which is probably her more natural position, is entirely up to Ante Juric. I mean, Claire Corbett, I don't know how much game time she'll see. She was quite good for the MacArthur Rams, to the point where the first game I commentated her, I didn't realise she was only 15 years old until I saw her named in a representative squad list a couple of months later, and she was playing, and I'm just kind of like, oh my gosh, what do you mean she's only 15? So I think those are sort of like my outer ones to watch. Sort of just like as a whole, I do want to say Sky Helmaric, but I also saw the lack of game time that Amber Luxmeyer got last season, coming off the back of an NPL Women's Golden Boot campaign, which is what Sky Helmaric is doing. So I don't want to put the expectations too high there. So I'm going to go through all that to say that my one to watch is going to be Amelia Cassar. She comes over on a 3-year deal from the Western Sydney Wanderers. I think that she is going to be a star of the future. Ante Juric has already talked in quite high praise for her, so I think that it's clear based on that she will probably be a key part of his plans this season. And on a 3-year deal, I think she'll be given every chance to sort of prove herself, if only to try and get Sydney FC a transfer fee after like year 2 of this deal. And if you liked our Sydney FC preview, you can have a look at the rest of the A-League Women's Season previews by clicking in the playlist below.